Today, our committee will consider the fiscal year 2024 appropriations bill recommended by the subcommittee on the legislative branch, the fiscal year 2024 appropriations bill recommended by the subcommittee on commerce, justice, science, and related agencies, and the fiscal year 2024 appropriations bill recommended by the subcommittee on financial services and general government. I'm going to start us off today with some opening remarks on the three strong bills that we have before us today, and then the Vice Chair will give her opening remarks. Senator Collins will make the usual and customary motion to vote on final passage of the bills, and I intend to have those three votes promptly at 11:20 today. There are a number of other committees holding executive sessions this morning, so I ask everyone to be here at that time so we can have full attendance for those votes, and then members can get to where they need to be. Following those three votes, we will move to the consideration of amendments to the three bills. We had a very productive markup at the end of June, and I'm so glad to keep that momentum going here today. Vice Chair Collins and I agreed at the start of this Congress that it was important to return to regular order and work together to find common ground, produce serious spending bills that move our country forward, and ensure the Senate's voice is heard loud and clear in the appropriations process. We have an obligation to keep this process moving, and we are determined to show the American people Congress can work in a responsible, timely, bipartisan way to pass our funding bills that make their lives better and get our government and our communities the resources they need to keep our nation safe and competitive. And the overwhelming feedback I've heard from members on and off this committee is they want the same thing. So far, we have made good progress and at a good pace. I'm grateful to all the subcommittee leaders and staff for the work they did to hold over 40 hearings this spring and the work happening now to craft the strongest possible funding bills under difficult circumstances. Before the recess, this committee considered and passed two strong spending bills, the Military Construction, Veterans Affairs, and Related Agencies bills, and the Agriculture, Rural Development, Food and Drug Administration, and Related Agencies bill. And what's more, we did it in a 28-0 vote. I'm hopeful that we see similar widespread support for all three of the bills before us today, which were written under some very difficult limitations, but are nevertheless bills that will protect key investments and move us forward. I know the caps in the deal President Biden and Speaker McCarthy struck are not what we would have all preferred, and I've spoken at length about my concerns about how those caps limit our ability to invest in our country's future, and my concerns have not disappeared. But we have a job to do. So here in the Senate, we are moving ahead to make full use of all the resources in the debt ceiling agreement, honor its terms, and write the strongest possible bills while lessening the blow of the cuts and caps, which are tough across the board, and especially on so many of our vital non-defense priorities. We are making clear the Senate is focused on writing serious bills that can actually be signed into law and doing the most we possibly can for people back home. And the three bills that we are voting on today provided much-needed investments in our nation. The legislative branch bill provides crucial resources so we all can continue doing the work of the American people. It ensures the people who protect us and our staffs and our nation's capital and all its visitors have the resources they need. And that includes key resources for the Capitol Police to hire, train, and retain officers. This bill helps Congress stay prepared for threats, including cyber attacks, severe weather, and other emergencies, so that this institution can be fully operational and jump into action at any given moment, especially when a crisis hits. It supports the Government Accountability Office, the Congressional Budget Office, and the Congressional Research Service, which provide the insight and oversight that I think every one of us would agree is crucial to writing effective, evidence-based legislation. It strengthens efforts to support working-class parents on the Hill by taking steps to make childcare more accessible for staff and updating lactation rooms for nursing moms. I happen to think that more moms and more parents should work here in Congress, and this will help that. And it literally helps the architect of the Capitol keep our lights on and the Capitol Police keeping the doors safely open. So I'd like to thank and commend the chair and ranking members, Senators Reid, and Fisher, and the staffs of the subcommittee for their truly excellent work putting together that strong bipartisan bill. We will also consider the Commerce, Justice, Science, and Related Agencies bill, which includes many key investments that keep our country safe and competitive. I cannot overstate how important this bill is to our economy. Investments to strengthen our businesses and communities by connecting them to high-speed internet they need to do just about anything in the 21st century, strengthening our trade partnerships across the world, and keeping our supply chains running smoothly. Investments in NOAA to restore salmon, which are not just a cornerstone of our economy in Washington State, they are a way of life, and investments to maintain our global leadership in science and innovation, from research and development to keep us on top of the technologies of tomorrow, from advanced manufacturing, quantum computing, AI, clean energy, and more, to continuing our legacy of leadership in space by strengthening the Artemis missions to send Americans to the moon. And then there are the investments in law enforcement to protect our families from drug trafficking that is bringing deadly fentanyl into our communities, domestic terrorism, cyber attacks, or white supremacy and the uptick in hate crimes and violent attacks, and to protect our civil rights as well, including the all-important right to vote. This bill includes a significant increase in funding for the Department of Justice's Office on Violence Against Women to prevent violence against women and better support survivors, especially Native women on tribal lands, which has long been a major priority for me and many of us. And it funds the Access to Sexual Assault Nurse Exams program that I work to establish so survivors can get the care they need. We cannot skimp on keeping people safe, and this bill maintains and builds on our investments to do that. So I want to recognize and thank the chair and ranking members, Senators Shaheen and Moran, and the staffs of the subcommittee for the very hard bipartisan work that went into pulling a strong bill together given some of the really tight constraints. And last for today, we have the Financial Services and General Government Bill. This bill is so important because the strength of our country is directly tied to the strength of our economy. And I mean on Main Street, not just on Wall Street. So I'm very glad we're able to support Treasury's critical work, regulating our banks, strengthening our economy, and protecting American workers and savers from paying the price for Wall Street's mistakes. And we also need to protect their nest eggs, which is why this bill includes funding for FTC, which protects Americans from consumer fraud, especially seniors, who, as we all know, are very common targets of criminals, and funding for the program that I established in my bipartisan retirement bill last year to help connect people with retirement accounts from past employers that they are missing. This bill also funds our work enforcing our sanctions against Russia, Iran, drug cartels, and other dangerous actors. And it invests in ensuring we have a capable, responsive, and accountable federal government that delivers for the American people, which includes tackling pressing challenges like the opioid and substance use disorder crisis that is causing so much pain in communities across our country, and why I'm so glad this bill delivers new and much-needed resources for the office responsible for coordinating our federal response to the opioid epidemic. It also provides funding for the new Office of Pandemic Preparedness and Response. I worked very hard to establish this office as part of my bipartisan Prevent Pandemics Act because it is clear families need us to do better next time a crisis like COVID strikes. So I'm very glad that we've been able to work together to get this off the ground. I really want to commend and thank the chair and ranking members, Senators Van Hollen and Hagerty, and the staffs of the subcommittee for the excellent work to land this bill in a good place, especially given the very tough top-line numbers we're all working with. These three bills provide resources our country and our communities are counting on and keep up critical investments in our competitiveness and future. So let's continue showing the American people how seriously the Senate is taking its job and continue working in a diligent and bipartisan way to pass these bills that can actually become law and that will actually make people's lives better. Let's vote these out of committee with broad bipartisan support, just like we did with our first two bills, and after that we can keep the ball rolling with the rest of our appropriations bills as well, because we all want to return to regular order. There is absolutely no need for chaos or shutdowns, and no one wants to see a damaging CR that would slash critical programs across the board. So I hope we can continue this progress with a full slate of bipartisan funding bills that make the investments our country needs to succeed, and that we can continue discussing how we lessen the damage of the caps on the defense spending and cuts to our non-defense spending. This process is never easy, and it was never going to be easy this year. But we are moving forward, and I'm grateful to all of my colleagues on both sides for putting in the work to get us here. And now I hope all of you will be with me on these votes so we can ensure, as I've said many times now, that the Senate makes its voice heard and this chamber has its say on how we invest in America's future. Senator Collins.
Thank you, Chair Murray. Last month, this committee held its first markup since 2021 and reported out with unanimous bipartisan votes the agriculture and military construction VA appropriations bills. Today, we can reconvene to build on that progress and to reinforce our commitment to regular order by considering 3 more funding bills. As Chair Murray outlined, we will begin today's markup by considering the legislative branch appropriations bill. This bill provides the resources that helps Congress to fulfill its constitutional responsibilities, funding everything from the Government Accountability Office, which helps Congress to make informed decisions about taxpayer dollars, to the Library of Congress, which includes the Congressional Research Service, to the congressional staff who provide analysis to us, as well as the invaluable constituent service. And speaking of congressional staff, I do want to thank all of the staff of our committee for their incredible hard work. I know many of them are operating on very few hours, if any, of sleep. This bill also provides needed resources for the Capitol Police and the Senate Sergeant at Arms that will allow for increased security of the Capitol grounds, which hosts more than 3 million visitors each year. We are fortunate to have 2 experienced legislators at the helm of this subcommittee. Chairman Reed is a longtime member of this committee with whom I was privileged to serve for several years leading the Transportation and Housing Appropriations Subcommittee. And we all benefit from Senator Fisher's experience as the ranking member of the Senate Rules Committee. I commend them both for their work. Next, we will turn to the Commerce, Justice, Science Appropriations Bill. I'm pleased that even under tight budgetary constraints, this bill is still able to provide judicious increases for law enforcement so that we can support the civil servants who are charged with combating the fentanyl crisis, apprehending violent fugitives, and prosecuting criminals. Notably, the bill would increase funding for many of the state and local law enforcement grant programs that our communities care so deeply about. This includes anti-opioid task forces that are so important in our fight against the illegal narcotics, the Regional Information Sharing Systems, known as RIS, program that facilitates cooperation among federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies, the BURN grant program that supports a range of activities from prosecution and corrections to prevention and drug treatment. I'm particularly glad that this bill rejects the cuts proposed in the president's budget to vital programs that support activities like drug courts, veteran treatment courts, and addressing the rape kit backlog. I also appreciate that the bill includes resources for important programs that have enormous economic impacts in many of our coastal communities. I thank Chair Shaheen and Ranking Member Moran, both very experienced and talented legislators, for their excellent work on this bill. Next, we will turn to the Financial Services and General Government Bill. As the name implies, and as I remember from my service on this subcommittee, this bill covers a wide swath of the federal government, funding issues from anti-terrorism efforts at Treasury to the operation and protection of the judicial branch. The subcommittee has addressed the IRS's budget in a responsible way and continues the call for greater protection of taxpayer information. I want to thank Chair Van Hollen and Ranking Member Haggerty for their leadership and their hard work on this bill. The issues that they've resolved were not easy, but they persevered. Finally, I want to thank Chair Murray for holding this markup and for her continued resolve and commitment to regular order. Today's full committee markup is the second in a series of 4 that we hope to hold before August. Our goal is to have all 12 annual appropriations bills reported by the end of the month so that they can be brought to the Senate floor for consideration. It is surely an ambitious undertaking, but this committee is clearly up to the task, up to the challenge. I look forward to today's markup and to supporting each of these bills. And with that, I would make the following motion. Madam Chair, I move that the committee report favorably an original bill making appropriations for the legislative branch for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2024, and for other purposes. An original bill making appropriations for Commerce, Justice, Science, and related agencies for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2024, and for other purposes. And an original bill making appropriations for financial services and general government for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2024, and for other purposes, provided that each bill be subject to amendment and that each bill be consistent with its budget allocation. Provided further that the chair of the committee or the chair of the subcommittee reporting the original bill be authorized to offer the substance of the original bill as a committee amendment, the nature of a substitute to the House companion measure.
Without objection, so ordered. Thank you so much, Vice Chair Collins. We are waiting for two subcommittees to wrap up their, or two committees, not this one, to wrap up voting right now. They should be here in the next 5 minutes. They should be here shortly. And the minute they walk in, we are going to begin voting. In order to keep things moving, I will turn to Senator Reed to report the legislative appropriations bill. Once we have moved forward, we will actually vote. But I would ask Senator Reed, if you see members come in, to let me interrupt you.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Vice Chair. The fiscal year 2024 legislative branch appropriations bill makes key investments to ensure an efficient, effective, functioning government that works for the American people. It provides funding, staffing levels, and infrastructure to ensure the safety of the U.S. Capitol complex and keep it accessible and open to the public. In addition to upgrading Congress's physical security and cyber defenses, it also maintains the capacity of important legislative branch agencies, such as the Nonpartisan Watchdog Government Accountability Office, which helps enhance transparency and accountability throughout the federal government to save taxpayers' money. It also makes needed investments to continue to modernize components of the People's Public Library, the Library of Congress. And it prioritizes operations and technology upgrades at other key agencies, like the Congressional Budget Office and the Government Printing Office and Publishing Office. Together, our mission as appropriators is to ensure these key departments and federal agencies better serve the American people both now and in the future. To achieve that goal, our bill focuses on investments in 4 main areas to ensure that the legislative process is fulfilled: security, oversight, campus operations, and constituent services. The bill provides resources to ensure we are supporting our most important resource as legislators, our workforce, who, as everyone knows, go above and beyond to serve the American people. Without the workforces of the Senate, the United States Capitol Police, the Library of Congress, the Architect of the Capitol, the Government Accountability Office, and so many more, we would not be able to effectively perform our role as senators. The funding caps in the agreement between the President and the Speaker do not allow us to fully achieve what we would like to accomplish to move this institution forward. Still, I believe that this legislative branch appropriations bill is a solid and bipartisan bill. I would like to thank Ranking Member Fisher and her staff, Lucas Agnew and Molly McCarty, for working closely with us to draft the legislative branch bill and report. I'm honored to serve alongside Senator Fisher both on this subcommittee and also on the Armed Services Committee. She is a fierce advocate for Nebraskans, and we share a common agreement on the importance of advancing this bill. I'd also like to thank my team, Richard Braddock, Maria Calderon, Jackie Meach, for their dedicated work. Our respective staff spent countless hours working together to craft this bill and report to ensure the legislative branch agencies have the necessary and critical tools to achieve their missions. Some specifics: the bill provides funding to support our Capitol Police, who keep all of us safe each and every day, and provides the tools that the department needs to keep our Capitol safe and secure. It also provides the Architect of the Capitol with critical resources to support not only the security of the complex, but also maintain the operations of the buildings and grounds within the complex. It ensures that the Government Accountability Office, the Congressional Research Service, and the Congressional Budget Office have the staff and resources needed to conduct the critical analysis, oversight, and research to support the work of the Senate. And it provides funding to support programs that allow the Senate to be a workplace of choice and ensures that we can hire and retain the most talented workforce, which is critical to our success as an institution. Again, I believe this legislative branch bill offers a strong bipartisan spending blueprint. I urge my colleagues to vote in favor of it. And it would be remiss if I did not thank the Congressional Budget Office and Government Publishing Office teams who worked overtime on a very tight and aggressive timeline to support not just this subcommittee, but all of our subcommittees so that we could develop and present fiscally responsible spending bills like the ones before us today. Madam Chair, I would yield to my ranking member if it's appropriate.
Thank you very much. And we have at least one committee that is joining us. We're waiting for Judiciary. So Senator Fisher, if you don't mind, if you could go ahead and proceed with your opening remarks. Hopefully by the time you finish, we'll be able to vote. So thank you to everyone for their patience this morning. Senator Fisher.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I'd like to thank you and Vice Chair Collins for your work in moving the appropriation process forward. I'm also grateful to the chairman of our subcommittee, Senator Reed, for his leadership in drafting the fiscal year 2024 Ledge Branch Appropriations Bill. I appreciate Senator Reed's commitment to crafting a bipartisan, fiscally responsible bill that still meets the needs of our agencies. The bill makes strategic investments in the security of Congress and the capabilities of the Senate to work on behalf of the American people. It provides additional resources for the Capitol Police and the Senate Sergeant-at-Arms that will keep Congress safe and secure in an evolving threat environment. The physical and cybersecurity of the Capitol complex and member state offices remain a top priority, and this bill will address those needs. The bill invests further in the Government Accountability Office to support the oversight role of Congress and ensure the proper use of taxpayer funds. I'm pleased to see the committee return to regular order on the consideration of appropriations bills. The American people deserve transparency of our budget process, and this markup is a positive step toward that goal. I look forward to working with all of my colleagues here today as we make progress on the FY24 bills. In closing, I'd like to thank Chairman Reed's staff, Richard Braddock and Maria Calderon, for all of their efforts on the bill. And I would also like to join Chairman Reed in acknowledging the hard work of the CBO and CPO staff to help produce this bill and report. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Fisher. We are still waiting for the Judiciary Committee to finish, which should be very shortly. Senator Shaheen, if you don't mind, if we could have you do your opening remarks while we're waiting for them, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Chair Murray and Vice Chair Collins. Thank you for your leadership and for your support for the fiscal year 2024 Commerce, Justice, Science, and Related Agencies Appropriations Bill. I think I probably represent the sentiment of everybody on this committee and in the Senate when I say how much I appreciate both of your efforts to return to regular order so that all of us have a say in the bills that we produce. So thank you both very much. I want to start by thanking my ranking member, Senator Moran, and his staff for all of their great work. Brian Daner, Kevin Wheeler, and Alex Schultz, thank you for working closely with me and my staff. This committee has a record of bipartisan collaboration, and I'm proud that this bill carries on that tradition and really appreciate the working relationship that Senator Moran and I have had in this process. The 2024 CJS bill before us meets the subcommittee allocation of $71.7 billion in discretionary funding, and it continues investing in a wide range of critical programs that affect the lives of all Americans. It prioritizes keeping our communities and nations safe and secure, furthering United States leadership in science and innovation, and assisting the growth and prosperity of American businesses at home and abroad. We've worked to ensure that this bill gives our communities the tools they need to build a safe and prosperous future. And these investments focus on critically important needs like combating violent crime and gun violence, supporting survivors of domestic and sexual violence, and tackling the epidemic of substance use disorder, particularly as states like my home state of New Hampshire and other states battle deadly threats like fentanyl and xylazine poisoning. In addition, the bill addresses economic security across our country. We make critical investments that will directly foster economic growth, accelerate exports of American products, enhance safety through accurate weather prediction, and promote innovation throughout the economy. Finally, this bill prioritizes many other important policies that are necessary for America's future success, including investments in climate resilience, environmental restoration, and space exploration. And I want to just give a few specific examples of the resources that are being provided for incredibly important missions and programs. We have $732 million for the Office of Violence Against Women, for those VAWA grants. That's the highest funding level ever for these life-saving programs. $612 million to fight the ongoing and evolving opioid epidemic, $11 billion to advance initiatives from the Bipartisan Chips and Science Act, $1.5 billion for NOAA's weather satellites, which are key to accurate weather prediction needed to protect life and property, and certainly we've seen that in the last week with the torrential rains and flooding across New England with the tornadoes and other weather events in the Midwest and the South. And the tools for NASA to return astronauts to the moon, including the first woman and person of color, and to maintain U.S. leadership in space. These specifics represent just a handful of the more than 1,600 programmatic requests from senators that Senator Moran and I have tried to meet. All of the work that we heard from each of you and other members of the Senate helped to make this bill better. We were glad to work with everyone to create a bill that we hope you can support. And I would just like to close by pointing out that none of this would have been possible without my dedicated staff. I want to thank Jess Berry, Mike Benardzik, Blaise Sheridan, Lindsay Erickson, and Angela Kalalam for their good work. Now let me turn to Ranking Member Moran for his comments.
Thank you, Senator Shaheen. And for the information of all members, we are waiting for judiciary so that we can have 3 of our members here. You have to vote in person on this committee, so we are trying to get you an exact time. But Senator Moran, I am going to turn it over to you, and thank you for your work on this.
Chairman Murray, thank you. And Senator Collins, the ranking member, the vice chairman of this committee, thank you for your leadership. And Senator Shaheen, thank you for your kind remarks. And I, too, share the desire and outcomes that we've been able to achieve working together to satisfy our colleagues, but more importantly, to try to do the best we can for the benefit of the American people. I'm pleased that we're here. This is always a roller coaster, and it does seem to me that we're now back on path for consideration of our bills on the Senate floor. I'm counting on Senator Schumer and his commitment that all 12 appropriation bills will be considered, and that's hugely important for this committee, for its work to be considered and those results concluded. It also helps us in explaining to the American people what we're doing. It's hard to do things when every bill is combined with 11 others. You begin with a black eye in the way that we've been doing things. And I want every member of the United States Senate to have an opportunity to make their mark on these bills. So I'm pleased that we're where we are today. I've enjoyed and appreciated the chance to work with all my colleagues in trying to get this result. The Fiscal Responsibility Act reduces this bill's capability of spending by $1.3 billion. There are those who have criticized, perhaps more on our side than on the Democratic side, that the Fiscal Responsibility Act didn't do enough. I don't know what enough always is, but I want to point out to those critics that Senator Shaheen and I are working with $1.3 billion less as a result of the passage of that legislation. So when people ask for fiscal responsibility, this may or may not be enough fiscal responsibility. We still have huge debts, and interest rates are a challenge, and inflation is a problem for every American. But at least, as evidenced by our work, we are working with a lot less money than we have been working with in the past to accommodate and to accomplish this legislation. I would divide our bill up into three categories. The first is the Department of Commerce. This agency's funding is completely flat. If there's any excess in their budgets, they will have to accommodate that, the inflationary increases that are going on within the department. Small increases within that flat funding were provided for supply chain security and for critical emerging technologies, things like ITA and NIST. These were priorities for many Republicans, and they were a priority of Secretary Raimondo. The mark increases by $200 million NOAA satellite expenditures to recapitalize the weather satellites that are in our orbit. A hugely important thing for Kansans, but for all Americans, the weather. And we were able to accomplish that as a result of the efforts by Senator Murray and Senator Collins and the addition of $350 million to our bill to deal with emergency circumstances. And the inability to keep satellites in space for weather is one of those. So the Department of Commerce flatlined spending, a few ups and downs and priorities that we made. In the Department of Justice, the top line number was cut by $817 million. That's a 2.13% reduction. All the DOJ agencies received modest increases of 1% to 1.4% for their salaries and expenses. That's where the increase, there again, we have cut the spending at the Department of Justice by more than $800 million, but we've given them the opportunity to pay their salaries and staff salaries with a potential of a 1 to 1.4% increase, something less than inflation. This is not enough to pay the inflationary costs, but it should help enormously in avoiding layoffs, particularly at the law enforcement agencies within this budget. Small increases were added to a handful of grant programs that have broad bipartisan support: Burn JAG, RIS, Anti-Opioid Task Force, and VAWA. The FBI's construction account was cut by $591 million. Consequently, the FBI's top line is cut by $458 million. NASA is cut by $383 million, a 1.5% reduction. I'm a supporter of NASA and space exploration. They will have significant challenges in continuing all of their programs. I'm disappointed by that. The science community and certainly NASA contractors, they will be disappointed in that as well. These deep and painful cuts were inevitable under the deal that the Speaker and the President cut. We were able to protect the most important national priority within NASA's budget, at least in my view, which is to return humans to the moon and maintain our strategic advantage in space. NASA will have a lot of work to do to figure out how to continue on the programs they are currently planning. And then with NASA, I said I was doing this in three components. We have the Department of Commerce, we have the Department of Justice, and then we have science. NASA is a significant component of that, but another one that is hugely important to the country and one that this committee cares a lot about is NSF. And it is basically level funded. They faced about a $39 million cut. We did what we could to protect CHIPS and Science Act, and again, with the money that the chairman and ranking member found for us, we were able to provide additional support for NSF. Finally, within that NSF top line, EPSCoR, which matters a lot to me and to many on this committee, was increased by $20 million, a 7.8% increase. I generally have, in giving my remarks about what's in a bill or what we're doing today, I've done it in a broad way. I wanted folks on the committee to hear more specifically what the challenges were and how we address them. And some of the things in there people will cheer, and some of the things in there people will be terribly disappointed by. So we have done our work to the best of our abilities and to try to make certain that with the dollars that we have, that good things happen. I think I'm about done.
And for
Because
the-
you want me to be done?
Yes, that would be.
So maybe I
think
should
we
say
all-
I am done instead of about done. But if
I
you
won't
wouldn't
take a
mind,
vote on
Chairman,
that, but yes.
I'd like to thank Senator Shaheen again and her staff, Jessica Berry, Blaise Sheridan, Lindsay Erickson, Mike Bednarchik, Angela Callum, and my own staff, Brian Danner and Kevin Wheeler. And thank you both.
Thank you very much. We are going to proceed with the vote. I know other members have been very patient. I appreciate that, and we will begin with the vote to report the legislative branch appropriations bill, subject to amendment. Clerk will call the roll.
I have a manager's amendment, that'll come later.
Senator Feinstein, Senator Durbin, Senator Reed,
Aye.
Senator Tester, Senator Shaheen. Aye. Senator Merkley. Senator Coons. Aye. Senator Schatz. Aye. Senator Baldwin. Aye. Senator Murphy. Aye. Senator Manchin. Senator Van Hollen. Aye. Senator Heinrich. Aye. Senator Peters. Aye. Senator Collins.
Aye.
Senator McConnell.
Aye by proxy.
Senator Murkowski.
Aye.
Senator Graham. Senator Moran.
Aye.
Senator Hoban. Aye. Senator Bozeman. Aye. Senator Capito. Aye. Senator Kennedy. Aye. Senator Heidsmith.
Aye.
Senator Haggerty.
Aye.
Senator Britt. Aye. Senator Rubio. Aye. Senator Fisher. Aye. Senator Murray.
Aye. On this vote, there are 24 ayes, 0 nays. The bill is, sorry. On this vote, there are 24 ayes, 0 nays. The bill is agreed to. Next, we vote to report the Commerce, Justice, Science, and Related Agencies bill favorably, subject to amendment. The clerk will call the roll.
Senator Feinstein. Senator Durbin. Senator Reed. Aye. Senator Tester. Senator Shaheen. Aye. Senator Merkley. Senator Coons. Aye. Senator Schatz. Aye. Senator Baldwin. Aye. Senator Murphy. Aye. Senator Manchin. Senator Van Hollen. Aye. Senator Heinrich. Aye. Senator Peters. Aye. Senator Collins.
Aye.
Senator McConnell.
Aye by proxy.
Senator Murkowski.
Aye.
Senator Graham. Senator Moran.
Aye.
Senator Hoban. Aye. Senator Bozeman. Aye. Senator Capito. Aye. Senator Kennedy. Aye. Senator Heidsmith.
Aye.
Senator Haggerty.
Nay.
Senator Britt. Aye. Senator Rubio. Aye. Senator Fisher. Aye. Senator Murray.
Aye.
Manchin's back.
Senator Manchin. Senator Graham.
Diane.
Senator Graham, did you ask for consent to be recorded as yes on the first vote?
Sorry. You're fine. And Senator Feinstein.
I'm sorry.
Madam Chairman, if I hadn't been heard before, I want to be recorded as vote aye on the first and aye on the second.
Thank you, Senator Manchin. You are recorded that way. Senator Feinstein, do you want to be recorded as aye on the first bill? Yes.
Same for me.
Okay.
Judiciary was fun today, yeah.
And Senator Durbin is coming right now, I believe. Call his name.
Senator Durbin.
And aye on the first bill.
And I on the passage.
Yes, yes.
One as well.
Senator Durbin will also be recorded as aye on the first. With that, wait for the
Okay, so you're gonna say the first vote is now 27-0, and the second one is 26-1.
Okay. The vote on the legislative branch appropriations bill is now recorded as 27-0, and this bill, Commerce, Justice, Science, will be reported out 26-1. The bill is agreed to. With that, we're going to vote to report the financial services and general government bill favorably, subject to amendment. Clerk will call the roll. Oh.
And this is 20.
Before we call the roll,
You guys are making this real easy for me because Tester is here.
Before the
Senator Tester, would you like to be recorded as a yes? On both?
We took care of you.
This is worse than teaching preschool.
29-0 and 28-1. You guys are making this real easy.
Okay. With that, I would like to amend my previous statements. The first bill is reported out 29-0, the second 28-1, and the clerk will now call the roll on this with everyone in their seats. Thank you.
All right, Senator Feinstein. Aye. Senator Durbin. Senator Reed. Aye. Senator Tester.
aye.
Senator Shaheen.
Aye.
Senator Merkley. Senator Coons. Aye. Senator Schatz. Senator Baldwin. Aye. Senator Murphy. Senator Manchin. Senator Van Hollen.
Right.
Senator Heinrich.
Oh, I know.
Senator Peters. Senator Collins.
Aye.
Senator McConnell.
Aye by proxy.
Senator Murkowski. Senator Graham. Senator Moran. Senator Hoven. Senator Bozeman. Senator Capito.
Well, some of it's
Senator
us.
Kennedy.
It's not all staff.
Senator Highsmith. Aye.
Oh, I know.
Senator Haggerty.
Aye.
And
Senator Britt. Aye. Senator Rubio. Senator Fisher. And Senator Murray.
Aye. This bill is reported favorably, 29-0. And I want to thank all of the members for their help and support to get these strong bipartisan bills out. We will now move back to the bills as we started with, Senator Collins, Vice Chair Collins.
Madam Chair, as a courtesy to the leaders, Senator McConnell asked to be recorded as present and voting yes on the legislative branch appropriations bill, yes on Commerce, Justice, and Science, and yes on financial services and government, general government. I ask unanimous consent that the committee grant this request, noting that it would not set a formal precedent, nor would it change any vote outcome.
Thank you very much. Without objection, so ordered. And with that, we will now turn back to the legislative branch. Both Senators Reed and Senator Fisher, thank you for your opening statements and, again, for all your hard work on this. I will turn it to Senator Reed for a manager's package.
Madam Chair, at this time, I'd like to offer a manager's package for consideration on the legislative branch bill. This manager's package has been distributed to each senator's office, and the provisions have been cleared on both sides. If Senator Fisher would like to comment, I would invite her to do so. If not, then I would ask the committee to adopt the manager's package by a voice vote.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Amendment is agreed to.
Thank you, ma'am.
Senator Schatz?
Madam Chair, I know we're in a hurry and we have multiple markups, but I just wanted to flag the issue of intern pay. I'm not going to ask for a roll call vote on this. We did something very important. We provided each personal office with $50,000 only to be used for intern pay. I want to do the same thing for committee staff. We weren't able to accomplish it in this markup, and I'm not going to push the issue, but I think it's something that we should do on a bipartisan basis. It really opens the aperture of the kind of young person who's able to work in the United States Senate. There's no way to work in Washington for free unless you are already privileged. And then those are the people who become our LCs and our staff assistants and our LAs. And then we have a certain type of person, right? A person of privilege who's able to work for the United States Congress. That has to change. We decided on a bipartisan basis to change that for our personal offices, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to do that in the future for committee staff as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Schatz. Are there any other senators who wish to make comments on this bill in front of us?
Madam Chair, very
Senator Van
briefly,
Hollen,
I just
yes.
want to say amen to what Senator Schatz said. We worked together to get the intern program for personal offices. I think the committee interns should benefit the same way. Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no other comments, I really want to congratulate Senators Reed and Senator Fisher for all their work on this bill. Really appreciate it. And with that, we will move to the next bill. If there's no further amendments, we will. We did. We will now move to consideration of Commerce, Justice, Science, and Related Agencies Appropriations Bill. Again, Senator Shaheen, Senator Moran, thank you so much for all your hard work on this bill and for your opening comments. I will turn it over to Senator Shaheen for a manager's package.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have a manager's amendment that we would like to offer. It has been, I hope, distributed to each senator. If it hasn't, it's in the process. And the provisions in here have been cleared on both sides. I think this is a package of amendments that approves the bill, and I would like to ask the committee to adopt that manager's package on a voice vote.
Is there any senator who wishes to speak? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The amendment is agreed to. Are there any members who wishing to speak or offer amendments on the CJS bill? Seeing none, this bill will be again reported as amended. Thank you for being efficient. All right, now we will move to the Financial Services and General Government Appropriations Bill. I want to thank Senator Van Hollen, Senator Haggerty for all your work on this measure. I will turn it over to Senator Van Hollen to introduce this bill.
Thank you, Chair Murray, and I do want to start, as others have, thanking you and Vice Chair Collins for bringing this Appropriations Committee together so that we can do the important business for our constituents and for the country. Let me also say at the outset how much we enjoyed working with Senator Haggerty. I don't know if he's in the room. I know we will be back. But we were able to resolve many issues in a bipartisan way. I would also like to thank the staff who have been working very late nights and early mornings, starting with Ellen Murray, and then Diana Hamilton, Maddie Dunn, Dan Brandt, Winnie Chang, and Alex Schultz. And again, the staff on a bipartisan basis really worked well together, and I want to thank all of them. Colleagues, the Financial Services and General Government Appropriations Bill, also known as FSG, has a broad collection of agencies under it, from Treasury and the IRS to the Federal Judiciary to Small Business Administration, to agencies like the FCC, FTC, SEC. In fact, there's such a broad array, I'm not going to go into each and every one of them and what we did on each of their budgets. I do want to highlight a couple things that we were able to do on a bipartisan basis. One is FinCEN, which is an agency that works to crack down on international illegal financing. We wanted to make sure that the beneficial ownership database is able to crack down on bad actors in the international financial system, folks like Russian oligarchs and other kleptocrats. In order to further American security, the bill increases funding for the Office of Terrorism and Financial Intelligence. The bill also does provide the IRS the funds that it needs to provide customer service, to help modernize its systems, and to ensure that wealthy people who have not paid the taxes that are due have their taxes collected. I think it's no secret that as part of the agreement reached between President Biden and Speaker McCarthy and others, the IRS mandatory funding was cut, but we have done our very best to protect those priorities within the reduced amounts on an ongoing, that are reduced on an ongoing basis. We've also established funds to allow the administration to closely monitor and test fentanyl use and lacing, something that is on the mind of all of us and all of our constituents. Did it go off? Okay. Well, I get the hint, but no. So let me just say this. Senator Hagerty is not back yet, but again, I want to thank him. I think all of us who go through this process recognize that in these bills, there are some things we would like to get in that we haven't. There are also some things that are in these bills that some of us would prefer not be in. And I will just mention the legacy riders as a matter of record. There are a lot of riders that were put in years past, originally on a one-year basis, that have become sort of ensconced in these bills. I just want to say on the record, there are many of them that I oppose in this bill, but in the interests of getting a bipartisan agreement and getting these budgets through, we recognize that we had to make some tough choices. The final thing I will say, because it will be the subject of an amendment, as I indicated earlier, we cover the federal judiciary. I had hoped at the subcommittee level that we would be able to get some language requiring, finally, that the Supreme Court of the United States establish an ethics code of conduct. We were not able to get that done on a bipartisan basis, so I will be offering an amendment for the purposes of discussion, and we'll see where that discussion goes. But let me close where I started by thanking both the chair and the vice chair and Senator Hagerty. And with that, I yield the floor.
Thank you, Senator Van Hollen. And I would ask that if you could move your manager's package, and then hopefully Senator Hagerty or someone can respond back. But if you could move that package.
Yes, I will. And before I do that, I apologize for leaving out one of our important staff members, Maria Calderon, who is part of that great team. So this manager's package has been distributed to each senator's office. The provisions have been cleared on both sides. And I ask that the committee adopt the manager's package by voice vote.
Is there any member who wishes to speak? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Amendment is agreed to. I believe Senator Hagerty is returning, but Senator Moran, you wanted to be recognized?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and I'll be briefer than I was apparently the last time that got your ire. In this FSGG, I've been a member of FSGG until this session of the Senate, since I came to the Senate. Perhaps I should have stayed on in order to make sure that my number one priority was considered favorably. My number one programmatic request in FSGG was the funding for the Technology Modernization Fund, TMF. Unfortunately, that request was not only denied, but this bill would also remove $290 million from the fund in the form of a rescission. And I oppose that, believe it's a mistake. Bipartisan legislation that I authored in 2017 became law. It created this TMF fund to strengthen the federal government's cybersecurity and reduce wasteful government spending on alarmingly out-of-date legacy systems. Since first receiving funding in 2019, TMF has invested in more than technology modernization projects across 27 agencies of the federal government. There are many recent examples of successful cyber attacks against the federal government that have exposed sensitive data, including a cyber attack in February on the Marshals Service that compromised information about employees and fugitives and other law enforcement information. These breaches are incredibly damaging to the work of the federal government, intrude upon the privacy of Americans, and we should be doing more, not less, to address these vulnerabilities. That's why funding TMF was my priority, and that's why I submitted an amendment to protect that critical program. I appreciate some language, report language that Chair Van Hollen has included, but I still believe taking this funding from the program is a bad mistake. I have a paragraph, Senator Van Hollen, that now follows that says, in lieu of seeking a vote today, I'm ready to say that sentence if you could say the things that are necessary to assure me that the funding will be pursued.
Well, Senator Moran, first of all, thank you for your ongoing efforts with respect to the Technology Modernization Fund. I agree that it serves a useful purpose. One of the challenges we faced, especially in FISG, was most of the agencies we fund are salaries and expenses, and therefore they would have seen very deep cuts in real terms if we weren't able to take some of the funds from some of the capital budget parts. And this is always the problem, which is a lot of the things we need to be doing on the capital budget side, we don't when we are squeezed overall in terms of the budgets. That said, there are a number of capital type accounts within the FISG purview. And as the process proceeds, we look forward to working with you and GSA to see if we can identify funds to put back at least some of these dollars into the TMF account.
I take Madam Chairman, I take Senator Van Hollen's commitment seriously and believe that he will follow through on what he said. And in lieu of seeking a vote today, I'll continue my efforts to work with him and others to see that this is accomplished. I suggested a particular account for which this money could come from, and we'll continue to pursue that and others with you.
Thank you. With that, I want to recognize Senator Hagerty for his good work on this bill and for his opening remarks.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to thank both our chair and vice chair for your leadership in this committee, and I want to particularly let you know how much I appreciate all of your efforts to bring us back to regular order. It's very much appreciated not only by me and our members, but I think by the entire Senate, so thank you for that. And just as on a personal note, I'd like to thank the vice chair, Senator Collins. I appreciate your advice and your mentorship through this process. Thank you very much for that. I'd like to start, if I might, with an overall observation about where we stand as a nation. Currently, our country is on an unsustainable fiscal path. We can't continue to spend more than we collect. While the spending that this committee oversees, discretionary spending, is not the main reason for our fiscal problems, it's often the easiest to blame. And it's the type of spending that will suffer the most if Congress doesn't get our fiscal house in order. According to the Congressional Budget Office, the net interest payments on the debt as a percentage of our GDP will exceed our entire non-discretionary our entire defense discretionary spending in 2028. And 2 years later, it will exceed our entire non-defense discretionary spending. This is a serious shortfall. What it means is that we'll be paying more in interest on our debt than for our own national security in 4 years. I'd like to repeat that. In less than 5 years, we're going to be spending more in interest on our debt than we will be spending on our own national security. And as interest payments grow, we're going to be required to either cut from other important areas or take on even more debt, which will make the problem even worse. We've got to get our fiscal house in order, and I applaud the leadership of the chair and the vice chair to gather this committee together and to begin to discuss these critical issues. I'm pleased to join Senator Van Hollen today in presenting the fiscal year 2024 committee recommendations for the Financial Services and General Government Appropriations Act. I want to thank Senator Van Hollen and his dedicated staff, Ellen Murray, Diana Hamilton, Maddie Dunn, and Maria Calderon, for their work in a transparent and bipartisan manner with me and my staff. My staff includes Dan Brandt, Winnie Chang, and Alex Schultz. I want to thank them, too, for all of their hard work through this process. The bill before us today is the result of tough bipartisan negotiations and compromises by both sides. The bill funds the operations of the federal judiciary, the Department of the Treasury, and the District of Columbia, and dozens of independent agencies. While no one got everything they wanted, the bill contains a host of important provisions that improve the efficiency and operations of the federal government, that protect U.S. economic competitiveness, and enhance services for our constituents. As Chairman Van Hollen pointed out, the bill provides $16.8 billion in discretionary spending. Most importantly, this bill claws back $10.5 billion from previously appropriated accounts and reprioritizes that spending. I want to highlight the fact that I worked with Senator Van Hollen on a bipartisan basis to allocate funds under the guidelines that were agreed to by President Biden and Speaker McCarthy, and under the constraints of a partisan 302B allocation approved by this committee without the input of any Republicans, including myself. In that light, we found reductions. We held the line on critical areas like clawing back IRS enforcement funding. Additionally, the bill includes several important provisions that will strengthen our national security, that will root out waste, fraud, and abuse, and strengthen American financial systems. This bill encourages GSA to take action to ensure that no technologies from Chinese-owned Lorax, Dahua, or Huawei are included in the list of products that the federal government purchases. The bill maintains critical funding for the offices of Inspector General that are under our jurisdiction and increases the funding for the Council of the Inspectors General on Integrity and Efficiency in order to maintain a shared database that will help us eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse. The bill also includes several key oversight provisions for the Securities and Exchange Commission's rulemaking process. This will help ensure that stakeholders have meaningful input, and it will ensure that proposed rules are based on robust economic analysis. Finally, I specifically want to thank Chairman Van Hollen for something that's not included in this bill, but something that highlights our working relationship and our important ongoing work. Next week, the FSGG subcommittee will hold a hearing to review the budget request for the Securities and Exchange Commission for fiscal year 2024. While our bill includes funding for the SEC to maintain its current operation levels, I look forward to conducting robust oversight over one of the primary regulators of our financial system. With that, I would encourage all of my colleagues to support this bill.
Thank you very much to both Senator Van Hollen, Senator Haggerty, and all your staffs for a really great job. Are there any members wishing to speak or offer any amendments to this bill?
Madam Chair.
Senator Van Hollen.
Well, thank you. Senator Haggerty, I know you had to be out of the room. We're both on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, but I indicated that I enjoyed working with you and your team to put this together. As you indicated, there's a lot of good work in here. There's also things that you would have liked to get in that are not in, things that I would have liked to get in that are not in, and some things that are out. One of the things, as Senator Haggerty knows, that I had hoped to include in the subcommittee bill related to ensuring and establishing that the Supreme Court of the United States has a code of ethics. The lower courts have codes of ethics, and there's no reason that the highest court in the land should have the lowest ethical standards when it comes to having a code of conduct. And so the amendment that I proposed, and I think, Madam Chair, it's before you and members of the committee, but I will briefly explain what it does. It would essentially fence $10 million from the budget of the Supreme Court of the United States until the Chief Justice informs the appropriations committees in the House and the Senate that the court has adopted a code of ethics. I do want to stress, and we write it right into the amendment, that none of these funds can come from the Supreme Court security budget, a budget that we have increased over time. Now, I recognize that this bill, this amendment, is unlikely to have bipartisan support, and if that's indicated to me today, then in accordance with the overall understanding we reached, I would then withdraw it. But I would like to just know whether or not this is something that could be adopted. And I should also say, and I talked to him later, Senator Durbin, of course, chairs the Judiciary Committee, and one of the other reasons I'm prepared to withdraw it here is because he has already scheduled a markup on this same issue in the Judiciary Committee.
Senator Hagerty.
Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I just said moments ago how much I appreciated the bipartisan manner in which Chairman Van Hollen and I have worked together to draft a good bipartisan bill. And to that end, I'm pleased to say that rather than take $10 million away from the Supreme Court, we actually put together a bill that approves $9.8 million in increase for the security and the protection of the Supreme Court justices. This builds on the bipartisan legislation that I led in the last Congress with Senator Warner to enhance security funding in light of unprecedented threats that our Supreme Court justices were incurring. More fundamentally, I just don't believe that Congress should dictate to a co-equal branch of government how to conduct its internal operations. And along with recent court packing proposals, dangerous protests at justices' homes, I feel that this amendment would have the effect of intimidation and delegitimizing the court. And in my view, would amount to a poison pill that would be detrimental to our bipartisan work, and I would be very appreciative if Chairman Van Hollen would withdraw his amendment.
Well, Madam Chair and Senator Hagerty, I suspected that was still the case. And let me just say in closing here that I find it hard to understand how an amendment that says to the Supreme Court of the United States of America that you should have a code of ethics just like all the other federal courts becomes a poison pill. I guess it's a sign of where our politics has taken us. But I believe strongly that the Supreme Court of the United States and the Chief Justice need to adopt a code of conduct to begin to recover some of the lost confidence in the court. I recognize that probably the better forum for doing that is the Judiciary Committee. And for that reason, I will withdraw the amendment.
Thank you very much, Senator Van Hollen. And
Chairman.
Senator Murkowski.
There we go. Madam Chairman, I appreciate that this has been raised as an issue. I also appreciate that in the era of cooperation, it has been offered and withdrawn. I would agree that this is probably best heard in the Judiciary Committee, and I'm glad that that Senator Durbin is looking to advance that. I happen to be one on the Republican side of the aisle that thinks that the Supreme Court needs to have a code of ethics. I think most people in this country think that the Supreme Court, the highest court in the land, those 9 individuals, actually has one. All of the lower courts do. We certainly do in our legislative branch and the executive branch. But there is a process for that. I understand that. I fully respect the separate but equal nature of our 3 cornerstones of democracy here, and far be it from us in the legislative branch to determine what that code of conduct actually looks like. I came out very early with Senator King in a bipartisan proposal that I felt was pretty reasonable. I actually thought that it might incent the Supreme Court to move forward on their own without the direction of Congress. We haven't seen that yet. Maybe it will happen, maybe it will not. But I do think that it is something that, as we think about the integrity of our institutions, whether it is legislative, executive, or the judiciary, and certainly the highest court in the land, if Americans are going to have confidence in our institutions, they need to know, they need to understand the transparency with which we conduct ourselves, that code of ethics. And so I appreciate the light discussion for it, but my hope is that we will have that opportunity later on to address what I think most Americans believe is already in place for the United States Supreme Court.
Madam Chair.
Matt?
I'm not sure who's.
Go ahead.
Senator Hagerty.
I'd just like to refer back to the point that Senator Van Hollen made, having to do with where we are in the political process at this time. And if you think about what's been happening to the Supreme Court, they're under attack. The legitimacy of the Supreme Court is under attack. You've got a court packing commission that's in place right now, aimed at the Supreme Court, because there are people in America that are unhappy with the composition of the Supreme Court. So the decision has been made to create a commission to recommend court packing. It's been threatened, significantly threatened, in recent years. You've had unprecedented violence towards Supreme Court justices and a DOJ that refuses to enforce laws on the book that are intended to protect them. And I feel that this proposal would just add more weight to this tendency to delegitimize the court. It's not a good time to be bringing it up.
Thank you, Senator Hagerty. And let me just say for the record that I do believe that the Supreme Court needs to adhere to a binding code of ethics, and I appreciate Senator withdrawing the amendment today. I'm glad the Judiciary Committee is considering legislation this month, and I think that's the place to do it, so I appreciate your withdrawing.
Madam Chair, in closing, if I could just say a couple words in response to Senator Murkowski. Thank you for your leadership. I know about the bill that you have with Senator King. And as Senator Hagerty pointed out, we actually have increased the funds for court security in this bill, and this amendment specifically exempts any court security bill from what would have been fenced in order to ensure that they have a code of ethics. And finally, as you said, Senator Murkowski, it's not our place to dictate all the components of that rule. This amendment just says, Chief Justice, establish a code of ethics for the highest court in the land, because it's insane that the highest court in the land does not have a code of ethics as the lower courts do. So I appreciate the fact, as others have said, that this is going to be taken up in the Judiciary Committee. I do think it's an urgent matter. And finally, Senator Hagerty, I would say with respect to loss of confidence in the court, part of this is a self-inflicted wound because they have not done exactly what this amendment calls for.
Are there any further amendments? Seeing none, this bill shall be reported as amended. And I want to take a moment and just thank everyone for their participation in the markup today. As I said at the beginning, we have a very challenging path forward, but I know that this committee, working together in a bipartisan way, can find a path forward to produce the strongest bills possible under very tough circumstances. So I really appreciate everyone's cooperation. I want to thank Vice Chair Collins again for all of her work, all of our committee chairs today. And we'll announce that the committee will next meet on Thursday, July 20th, to mark up the Energy and Water Development, State, Foreign Operations and Related Programs, and Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development, and related agencies' appropriations bills. And with that, committee is adjourned.